This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk about Stop Killing Games failure in the EU, PS3 recomps on the way, multiple PlayStation 5 emulators making significant progress, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to the new Beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 145. I am your host, the man who is a PS5 emulator in development, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who is solely responsible for the Pro Pal World anti-Pokemon hate campaign and every single account that runs it, Justin, better known as I am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
It's really been slow, if I must say. I mean, even before we were recording, I was really trying to think of anything that had been eventful, and it honestly just has been a slow week. Not that I'm complaining or anything like that, but it's just been slow. I did mean to record some stuff on Sunday, but I kind of got engrossed in a game and of course we talked about that later on, but so needless to say, the recording didn't happen, so that'll be pushed back to a later point in time. But yeah, like I said, it's been a slow week.
All right, well, sometimes that's a good thing. As far as mine goes, Saturday I spent a lot of time working on my video. I still have quite a bit left to do in it, but I got through the largest section of the video because it's like broken up into segments, and the one segment that I did talking specifically about the higher learning curve, which had a whole bunch of like subtopics within it. So I worked on my video on Saturday. I spent a lot of the day, I spent probably a good 10 hours working on it. Basically going through two different sections. The second of which was the section talking about the higher learning curve associated with PC gaming. And that had basically a bunch of subsections within it, which is basically making it take a long time. Like when I finally finished with basically the only breaks I took being to get meals, and then like I spent, I think, a little bit of time with the kids watching a movie because we didn't do a movie night on Friday. Friday, I should back up. Well, I'll come back to Friday. Anyway, so I spent a lot of the day Saturday working on the video. Still have quite a bit left to do. But the big thing that made it take so long was just tracking down all the video clips that I needed. There's a couple occasions where I actually recorded something, but in a lot of cases it was just more I had to figure out where I had it saved, because I've saved video clips over the years in different places, and some of them on one drive versus another drive, some of them on my flash drive, some of them on my laptop, and so it was just like, rather than having to reinstall or reboot up with those games, it made more sense to just track down the video clips. And I ended up putting in a lot of video clips in general, separate, that are not specifically related to certain sections. So I'm happy with how it's coming along. It's just took a lot of work to get done what I wanted to do. But going back to Friday, on Friday, my kids had VBS all last week. And so Friday they had the church where they were having VBS, which is not our church. They had like a kids program where first they had all the different groups of kids like singing some songs that they learned over the week and doing the motions with that. That part didn't take very long. But then they did a couple other miscellaneous things, and then they had at the end a like show from, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he's basically doing the equivalent of a magic presentation, except that it was science. I mean, it was using actual chemistry and explaining how these things work and that sort of thing. but also using it as a springboard to share the gospel. So it was like a cool presentation. My wife and I really did not want to go because it's just, Friday, it's like, okay, Friday is pizza and movie night. It's a time to relax, to rest, and then, Saturday we go into more of our normal scheduled stuff, especially because Saturday is usually kind of a work day for both of us. But yeah, so because we had that on Friday, even though we still did pizza, we didn't do the movie until Saturday. So Saturday we did the movie. We ended up just ordering some Chick-fil-A for dinner, which is always good. But just by the end of the day, I was just exhausted. I didn't know what to make for dinner, and Chick-fil-A is always good. So we did that. But then yesterday, Sunday, was my middle son's birthday. So he turned 9 years old. And we, of course, had church in the morning and then did some of his presents in the afternoon. Or, well, did all the presents we have for him because we're doing like a separate actual birthday party at a local place, but they didn't have an opening until July 18th. But it was also something where my wife got something to do it as a free party with up to 10 guests. So it's like that's the major reason why we went with that, and so we're doing that on the 18th, and so he'll get the last couple of his presents then. But yeah, so we celebrated his birthday, and he wanted to go to Subway for dinner, which we had to kind of, well, we went to one location that we thought would be a nice location because it's like a quieter area where there's not where it's not super busy. But it turns out because it's in like more of a travel type gas station, it didn't have any place to sit down. And then on top of that, they were also out of some of the stuff, like specifically that he wanted for his sandwich. And so we ended up driving all the way down to a completely different location we hadn't been to before, which was a bit further away. But between that and the one that was a little bit closer, the one that was closer, we just hadn't been impressed with. And so we went to the further away location because we hadn't been there before, and it ended up being pretty good. But all that being said, this is kind of a more of a random note, but it was just something that was funny. So, one of the podcasts I listen to is the Good Morning Guys podcast, and I've actually interviewed almost all of the guys from that podcast on the Dads and Gaming thing that I did. They were some of my, two of them were some of my earliest guests. The last one I did was actually with one of their more recent co-hosts, which is Ryan Isley. So Ryan is a bit of a PC guy. I mean, he doesn't do it as much as I do, exactly as we do. But that's just more because he kind of like got off PC for a while and then he's getting back into it. So he had, they had been talking on their podcast about, all the price increases and stuff like that with Sony and the Steam machine and everything else. And, they had been saying, the other guys had been saying, basically, I have no idea how to build a PC. Like, I wouldn't even know where to start and that sort of thing. And so I had told them, hey, you go through PC Part Picker, you can put together a build. It won't let you put parts together that are incompatible, so on and so forth. I'd be happy to help you with building one. So he responds to it. Ryan responds to it. And he is just telling me about, he said, I just had a curiosity. I was seeing what my PC, my current build is, which is an AM4, what it's worth now compared to when I bought it. And I don't know what he originally paid for it, but right now it's worth around $1,400, which isn't bad. I mean, it's obviously more than he paid for it. And so he asked me, what is my PC, what is my current build worth? And I told him, I'm not really sure. It's been a while since I checked. But I decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to try to plug in everything that I have in my build, excluding the monitors, the mouse, keyboard, because that's all extra stuff, especially because of the fact that, like, you don't need more than one monitor. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can get cheap parts and that sort of thing. And keep in mind that the stuff I have in my PC, some of it, I have parts that I bought in 2016. I have parts that I bought in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Or it may be 2019, 2020. I can't remember the exact years. I have to look at the order history and everything again, and I don't remember the exact amounts I paid for it. But I want to say that if I were to add everything up with just the parts that are in my current build, it probably would be roughly the amount that I paid overall over the course of, like 5-6 years. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. It was more like closer. It was about 10 years because it was from 2016 through 29 years through 2025. So it was in that time frame, all the parts that I bought that make up the PC that I have. I was estimating roughly around $2,400 is about what I spent. And I'd have to actually do some digging to figure out exactly what I spent on a couple of those things, because like I know with the drives the 2 drives that I still have from 2016, like I can't find the original order invoice or anything that has the prices listed out. And since it was through my wife's brother-in-law that built it for me, and he gave me a kind of a deal, like I don't remember the exact breakdown for everything. I remember the total cost of the whole build, but the majority of those parts are not in this PC. All that's left in there is the original SSD and the original HDD. So the first 5 terabytes of RAM, 5 terabytes of RAM, 5 terabytes of storage.
This guy's been buying up the RAM.
5 terabytes of storage. And so that's the only thing from 2016. And then I have, I'm trying to think of, actually, now that I think about it, some of the parts that I bought in before are, some of the other parts I bought are actually in the other PC. But there's the 2 SSDs I bought in 2023, one in 2025. And then, of course, there's the new motherboard, RAM, CPU fan, and GPU that I bought last year. So, all that being said, I put everything in as close as I could possibly find it. There's a couple things that I couldn't even find the exact prices, but my current PC build value before monitors, mouse, keyboard, $5,200. It's mostly because of the storage.
Oh.
About half of that build is just the storage cost. Half the cost is just from that. Now, if I add in the monitors as well, and I'm still keeping the one monitor I got for free, I'm still counting as free. But the actual amount I paid for the monitor, well, yeah, the value that they are today is well, I'm sorry. The actual amount that the monitors would cost today, with those included, as well as the keyboard and mouse, which the keyboard they don't even make anymore, they don't sell anymore. That one I still have from 2016. And the speakers I still have from 2016. And the keyboard they isn't available to purchase anymore, so I just put the price that I paid for it and everything else. But adding all that in, the total value, and I'll also note that excludes my webcam, and like a Bluetooth adapter that I have. I guess I actually forgot to add in my my capture card too. I forgot to add that in as well. That would have added more to the value, but $6,400. So probably if I count the capture card, that would probably put another like $150. And then, some of the other things. So it's like, it ultimately is an expensive PC, but keep in mind, there's a lot of extra stuff that I didn't need, that it was just stuff like I added on over time. And one of my monitors was literally free. My 1080p 240 hertz monitor, that's an Alienware, I got for, I think it was $50. And it was just because when I bought the other parts for my 2018 or 2019 build, whichever it was, he basically said, I'll send you this monitor for just the cost of shipping, because I need to get rid of it before the end of the year, because it's a small business and it's a tax write-off essentially. So, I got that one super cheap. But yeah. So anyway, my computer is worth a lot more than what I paid for it. A lot more, easily. I really do want to try and figure out the exact amount I paid for everything. Even if it was spread out over the course of 9 years. Just because it would be an interesting experiment just to see the difference there. But obviously, like I said, half that cost is just the RAM, or I mean, just the storage. And then, oh yeah, the storage and the RAM. The storage and the RAM, that's over $3,000 right there. With just the storage and the RAM.
Oh, wow.
Because of how expensive everything is right now. It's insane. It's so crazy. So yeah, that's the reason why my computer is worth as much as it is, because I have so much RAM and so much storage. But anyway, I feel like there might have been something else I was going to tell you, but I honestly don't remember what it was. So yeah,
that's a good story. Did he take you up on your offer to like build a PC?
Oh well, this wasn't Ryan. Wasn't the one who wanted to build it. It was someone else.
Okay.
Because Ryan's built plenty of PCs, so he knows how to build PCs. He doesn't need my help. It's some of the other guys on the podcast. One of them in particular, he was talking about potentially. I mean, you just the thought of wanting to build, and like one of the other guys, who was one of the former co-hosts, who's also active in the Discord, had said that he'd. I mean, I know he had originally been looking at getting a Steam machine, but it's just too expensive, and so. He said that, I mean, he was asking about how reasonable it would be to build something that's going to last him for 8 to 10 years. And we kind of went back and forth on that, but nothing on that side yet. And the other ones, it's just kind of like I forgot to get to the whole punchline of everything that was funny, because I mean, not that this was a joke, but so then the two other co-hosts, I mean, so Ryan and I were going back and forth in the episode chat of their Discord, talking about PC parts and everything else, related to my parts, his parts, what kind of stuff's worth getting, so on and so forth. And so then one of them, responds, and he has like a gif of a guy with a complex math equation on the board. And it's like it's simple math. And then the other guy says, "Hey, this is not a PC parts channel. This is not a PC Master Race, whatever channel." And so I thought of the perfect response, and I did it. The GIF from, I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's the one with Tom Hanks where he's a captain of a ship, and Somali pirates take over, and then one of the Somali pirates says, "Look at me, I'm the captain now." We just took over their chat talking about PC stuff. It's like, hey, you're the ones who put him on the show, so you got no one to blame but yourselves. But yeah. So yeah. That was it.
Okay. About how much more or do you have to before you're done with at least the recording side of your video?
Well, everything's recorded. It's just not edited.
Okay.
I did all the recording. I don't remember when that was. It was the Saturday that I helped my nephew build his PC. So I recorded that stuff. I mean, it's possible I might have to do some additional gameplay recording here and there, but I have a ton of footage already, so that hopefully I won't have to do much, if any. I mean, like, the only recording that I did this time was I just had to record. I recorded a little bit of footage of Banjo-Kazooie running on my desktop, because all I had was Steam Deck footage. And since I talked about Banjo-Kazooie running at 240 frames per second, I needed to actually have footage of the game running at 240 frames per second. Widescreen and all that. So yeah. Okay. But I'm hoping I can get that done this weekend. I don't know for sure. It's just going to depend on how long the rest of it takes, because theoretically the other sections, because they're shorter, they shouldn't take as long to get through. But it's just hard for me to say, because I don't remember everything I said, and what, if anything, I would want to have specific footage for. So, But anyway, I know it. Well, at least in terms of footage, you've only been playing one game. But what have you been playing this week?
Yeah, so it actually has just been one game. And last Friday, we had the 1.0 version of Power World release. And, wow, a lot has definitely changed in the game. A lot of it for the good. Some of stuff here and there I might think, meh. I will get this one thing out of the way, which happened at the beginning, is when I booted up the game, I initially was not getting any sound whatsoever. And I thought, okay, I just need to turn up the volume on my desktop or something, or turn up the volume on my actual speakers. And so I did that, and I was like, huh, nothing's still coming out. And so I thought, okay, is something wrong? I tried rebooting the game, nothing happened. I also tried to make sure I didn't accidentally unplug or disconnect the speakers from my PC. I tried just doing some testing just to make sure audio was coming out to begin with, and everything was fine, but there was no audio. And then I went into the Steam forum chat discussion just to see, is anyone else having this problem? And a couple people did have this issue where there is no audio, or just extremely low for whatever reason. And what you essentially need to do is just boost the master volume up, and then you can actually get audio. So I'm not sure why that never happens in the pre 1.0 release version, so that was weird. But it definitely worked there. And I kind of had to do the same thing on the Steam Deck, which I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But the Steam Deck didn't really seem to have as big of a problem. I probably just had to turn up just a slight bit, but the audio was pretty much coming through clearly on that end. But yeah, so the game has had a lot of changes just for what has happened. I mean, for one thing, one of the biggest changes that you have is that you can build things outside of your base, which is huge. For the reason, if you say want to have maybe say special storage chests hidden around the island, just so it's like I don't want to necessarily go all the way back to camp. Which, I mean, you could always just warp back at any time, but you could just say, here's a spot, I can just go here. If there's something I want to have for a particular reason, just drop this here, have the items there. Or if I need to build something for one reason or another, I can just build that out in the field and not have to worry about, hey, I have to go back to my base, build something there, and then go back and do what I was doing there. And it definitely helps, I think, with the early part of the game, because there's, or at least what I initially did when I first played the game was I built my main base in essentially the starting area. And the reason why that's not really a good idea is because when you warp back, or when you want to warp back to your base, there are already essentially 2 warp points you can already go to that are nearby. And so it's like, that's pretty much a waste. You'd be better off going somewhere else to warp to, where there's, not really a warp point. So I essentially just built what I needed to build to craft whatever I needed to, so that way I could survive long enough to get to a better place and just build my base there, where that one point is close to a PAL conservatory, which later on I always warped to there. If I wanted to go to that island and come back, that was the quickest way to do that. And also, it's a nice, simple place to work as well, because something that I learned later on is that whenever your base gets raided, the enemies scale based on the area that you have built your base at. So my main base in my original game was in an area where the enemies were much more powerful than they probably normally would be. So it made defeating enemies a bit of a challenge, especially for the pals on the base who didn't level up as fast as the ones that I had in my party. So they're severely underleveled, and they're trying to fend off waves of enemies who are probably about 10 levels above them. So just building out at that early on section was a whole lot better for me. And one thing I'll say is that performance overall seems to slightly be improved from the base version. So running the game at the same settings I had before at 1440p, I'm getting roughly between 90 and 100 frames, with dips down to 80 on occasion. depending on where I'm at. And at worst case scenario, it's gonna drop to like 70, depending on like where you're at. But overall, it's still closer to like the 90, 100 range, and then in dungeons, it's 120.
Okay.
So that's good. And even on the Steam Deck, the performance seems to be slightly better than it was before, where it's probably around 50-ish, depending on where you're at. Sometimes they'll drop into around 40, but it definitely, with the exceptions where like certain areas where, okay, there's just like this big open spot here, and there's like a whole lot of the world that sort of has to render out, and because of that, it's just, you know, dropping the frame rates. But you can get somewhere between, say, 45 to 50-ish.
Okay.
Granted, the settings are still all on low because the Steam Deck can't be doing that.
Right.
If the game had FSR, maybe performance could be better, but I don't know how much. But on occasion, you could get to reach 60, but it's not going to be there, realistically speaking. One big improvement that I really think is great is that there's a whole lot less there's a whole lot less grind than in the base game. Like, it's a whole lot easier to level up than was in the original pre-release. So like, it cuts down on a whole lot of time. I mean, so far within, I'd say I don't know, maybe I've been playing for about 8 hours or so overall this past weekend. I was able to get through the first boss, and I'm right now about to face the second boss, or the second main tower boss. So, and that's without having any type of, or the same type of gear that I had originally when I played the game. So I'm doing better now than originally. But the game also does provide you with more opportunities to gain XP, which definitely helps with all the side quests and the other things they've put out in the world, which is like special towers where you can get schematics now instead of, I think, randomly finding them. They're now in towers, and there are also like a couple other towers that I've seen that serve kind of like the towers in Breath of the Wild, where once you climb up and activate them, they unlock a portion of the map.
Okay.
So 1.0 has included that, which is definitely nice as well. But yeah, definitely less grind, and there's more variety in a lot of things, especially with the dungeons. Before they were, I mean, they're all pretty much procedurally generated, I'm certain, but now there's sort of like more stuff you can do. Like, there's more platforming in them in a couple areas. There's also a special treasure trove room that you can find, which just has a lot of treasure and chests, and you can get certain items and stuff that'll help. Oh, and one of the best things with the dungeons are the cave mushrooms. So cave mushrooms essentially are needed to craft healing items. The problem is that in the pre 1.0 version, they were really hard to find, and also they were sort of like your food items where they can expire after a certain amount of time. So unless you crafted them into potions, they would just expire and be useless. And so essentially, also dungeons probably at most had one, or probably had about 3 or 4, but you need at least 3 to craft a potion. So you would have leftovers, and those would expire pretty shortly. Now, I've been able to find at least 8 in a single dungeon, and they don't expire anymore. So that has been great and has been very useful. I'm pretty. At first, I wasn't certain when I fought Zoe in the first fight, but I realized later on. Well, I thought while I was fighting her, she seems a whole lot easier than when I first fought her. And I'm sure I knew what to expect, and I knew that, hey, I've had difficulty fighting her before in the past, but I beat her in the first try. And then I thought about it, and I said, let me go back, check the footage that I just recorded, and check the footage when I originally played the game with her. And then I realized her health points are a whole lot lower than they were before. Also, so in the pre 1.0 version, she had 30,550 HP. Now in the post 1.0 version, she only has 12,900 HP. Wow. So it's definitely a huge nerf. But I did also realize when I went back and played the footage is that they also reduced the time you have to fight her. So before you had 10 minutes to beat her, now you only have 5 minutes.
Okay.
So that sort of balances things out here and there.
Yeah.
So I kind of like that because it's not necessarily as much of as a battle of attrition as it was before.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think it could have used a bit more of a challenge. Like I think maybe boost the HP up a little bit higher.
Yeah.
That could have helped. I mean, sure, you probably would have had to compensate with maybe say 2 extra minutes of to get through the boss fight, but it's definitely a whole lot easier to get through. So I do sort of appreciate that. That's not a pain, which will probably make the other bosses I had a difficulty with a whole lot easier now. So I'll just definitely see it then. And also sort of on that end with boss towers, before you had a checkpoint, a travel point at the top of them, but they removed them now in 1.0, which I guess kind of makes sense because there's already a travel point at the bottom of the tower. But the problem is after you beat the bosses, you immediately are teleported at the top of them. So unless you jump off, unless you have a glider on you or a PAL that can fly, you essentially have to jump to your death. So I think that's something that they overlooked. But I mean, granted, if you die, you can always just warp back and get your stuff. But I just think that's a bit of an oversight on the developer's part. But I'm not really, I don't think that's too big of an issue overall, but just something they could have fixed. And then the last thing that they added was fishing for pals, which is kind of I guess a neat little side thing, which can help you get new pals without having to actually battle them. And the way it works is kind of like in Stardew Valley, if anyone has played that, where it's just like, hey, you've got the fishing role, you've got the little meter, and the fish is in the meter. You have to keep it on long enough before you can actually fully catch them. Except I would say this is a bit worse because trying to tap the button is either too much or it's just not enough. And I think Stardew did it a little bit better on that end. But hey, if you can get free pals that way without having to go through a whole lot of hassle, with the chance of getting more powerful pals that are tougher than you if you have to fight them, I'm not complaining too much on that end. But yeah, that's like essentially everything. Like I said, I've gotten up through right before the second boss fight. In the end, I also add this, is they've added a story, more story content to it there. It's nothing really anything in depth. It's not going to, win any awards or anything, but it sort of gives you at least a reason as to why you're doing what you're doing. And at the same time, you get extra EXP, and that definitely helps you on that end with leveling up. But yeah, so overall, I'm definitely enjoying 1.0. I think this has definitely been worth the wait. And I'm definitely glad that I started fresh rather than continue playing it, because it's definitely a whole new experience than when I originally first played the game. So I definitely would recommend doing that instead of just continue playing with the full version, because it is worth going through with a new set of eyes. But yeah, that is everything that I have played.
One thing I can definitely say, looking at your footage, and I'm sure at least half of it is just because of the fact that you're playing on a stronger PC and at a much higher resolution, but it definitely looks a lot better than it did before.
Yes. Some of the textures did seem to be a bit improved in the world.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad that you've been able to do that, and that it hasn't been too much of a hassle going back to the beginning of the game. So that's good. All right. Well, on my end, so of course last week I had finished up Legend of Dragoon, and I was trying to decide what specifically to play next, because I was debating about whether I wanted to go back into Final Fantasy Type 0, or maybe I wanted to jump back into Salt and Sacrifice, or maybe if I even wanted to go back to Doom Eternal, because I'd been kind of thinking about that as well, especially since I have the DLC for Doom the Dark Ages, because I had bought the deluxe edition when I bought the game. So it's like, but I don't want to play that until I've finished Eternal, and I still have a lot left to do in Eternal, but I was leaning most heavily towards Salt and Sacrifice, so I decided to go ahead and start playing some more of that. And I definitely had like kind of a mix on my experience with the game. So I will say for starters that when it came to the game, I was definitely initially I was having a hard time figuring out where to go. Like I was walking around, I wasn't really seeing what exactly I needed as far as like placement and everything else, and it was honestly it was just kind of frustrating because I wanted to continue the game, but I didn't really know where to go next, and so I ended up just like looking up and finding an actual map because the game doesn't have map much like Salt and Sanctuary didn't, and so looking at that was helpful enough to help me figure out roughly where to go, and then I finally found an area that I could go to, and so I played a decent amount. I basically ended up I think I've gotten through like one proper boss and then like 3 of the mages. Um, Plus, just a handful of the random ones, the unnamed ones that show up around the map. There's one boss in particular, one of the mages, that was exceedingly frustrating because it has this attack that basically it fires off these spirit things, and the spirit things don't do that much damage on their own, but as they hit you, they build up like a curse on you. And then once it gets to a certain point, it does a huge chunk of your health of damage. And so it ended up just being one of those things that I died so many times to that because it's just I kept getting cheap shotted by that. And it wasn't always super easy to avoid either, and I was just really getting annoyed. I eventually beat it and was able to go past that, but then I was dealing with some other bosses where I had some frustrations. One of the last ones I did in particular, and whenever I would start the hunt for that boss, then one of the unnamed mages would show up like every time. And the thing is, that particular one like throws out like a tornado thing that just shoots you up in the air. And so then I'm trying to deal damage to it. Then it throws a tornado, throws me up in the air, and I crash down. And so it just ended up being frustration upon frustration upon frustration. And I ended up just deciding, all right, I'm quitting the game for now. And when I say quitting, not like permanently quitting, just more like I don't want to play this anymore. And so I was having this. Honestly, I was just getting kind of antsy. Like, I really wanted to play Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced because, I mean, of course, I love Black Flag. I'd heard really good thing. I mean, it was looking really good as far as the resync goes. I mean, even though there's definitely some changes to the game that I could see as being good or bad, for the most part, I was still really wanting to play it, but I don't have the money for it right now. And I thought about like seeing if I could get someone to like gift me the game or something, and then it just occurred to me, there's no reason I need to do that. I can wait to play this game. It's not that big of a deal, but I wanted something to scratch that itch, so I booted up Assassin's Creed Valhalla and got back to that. So I've been actually playing that quite a lot. A lot of it's mostly, I mean, I haven't really made the story proceed or anything, but I have been focusing on just doing a lot of random stuff in the world. I've thankfully been able to come across a couple of, a few optional boss fight things, and like one of them is more of they're all more challenging enemies, and they've had some stuff similar to that in the previous 2 Assassin's Creed games, with the Origins and Odyssey. But so anyway, I've been going through and doing some of that stuff, and playing both on my desktop and on my Steam Deck. Still getting 45 FPS, pretty close to locked on the Steam Deck, and then obviously like 150 plus on the desktop, sometimes up in the 200s, and of course 1440p ultra, all that. I did, just for giggles, turn it up to 4K rendering resolution, and then it was doing like 100 to 120. But I decided I'd still rather have the higher frames, so I put it back to native and just been playing it that way. But one thing that I did discover, though, while playing, so one of these optional boss fights, the boss is very fast, and I was having like no luck whatsoever with parrying them, which I did also, just as a side note. It seems that at least by default, and I think you can narrow it a bit, but the parry window is too wide for my taste. Like, you have to parry really early instead of it being like right before. It's more like you parry very early to actually get a successful parry, and it took me a while to figure that out. But the one boss in particular that it's actually the footage that's playing right now, because of how fast they move, I was realizing, okay, I just need to be able to dodge. But the thing is that I hadn't unlocked the ability that makes it so that if you dodge at the right time, then it slows down time so that you can get a bunch of hits in. And then on top of that, I was also using a close range weapon, and I read that, for one, I should get this particular ability, so I just had to like reset my ability tree and then get all the stuff so that I could actually get the particular ability. But then also, it suggested using something that has more range to it, like a spear. And since I hadn't been doing that, I decided to go and do that, and that made a huge difference. Not just for this one, but also for some of the other optional bosses. Like, there was one particular of the roaming enemies that I had previously attempted to fight a bunch of times on stream, actually. I think maybe it was even... I can't remember if it was during Stack Up last year or if it was a little bit during Extra Life this year, but it was just one that was giving me a lot of trouble, and once I gained the ability to slow down time when I dodge and use the spear, it made a massive difference, and I was able to get through that fight a lot more easily, and then like another one or two other ones. So yeah, I mean, like, Valhalla is not the greatest game in the world by any stretch, but I'm enjoying it enough, and it is at least scratching that itch. Because as much as I want to play Black Flag, I also think that it's probably a better idea for me to just wait for it to go on sale. I mean, at minimum, I'm waiting until after I get paid to buy it, but I will probably just wait till it goes on sale. And then I can, get a better deal on it. I mean, Valhalla is definitely not one that I'm going to be just, like, playing constantly till I'm done with it, because there's a lot of content in the game. But it is one that I'll at least play until I get tired of it, and then I'll take a break, and then I'll come back to it later, just like I did with Odyssey. But yeah, overall, still enjoying myself with that. And I feel like there was something else I was going to say with it. Oh yes, so because I had bought all the DLC for it a while back, because it was on sale and I got it for very cheap, for all the DLC. I had accidentally stumbled into one of the DLC quests, and I had no idea whether it was something that would be, whether it would be difficult or if it would be just like, okay, just do it, levels don't matter. And levels definitely do matter. It's a Ragnarok related DLC, so it's like you're going into, I can't remember the exact realm, but you're fighting Surtur, and that's the end boss fight of the realm. As a side note with that, so you're getting into some of the lore, some of which is also present within like God of War 2018. And one of the character that you fight, who's supposed to be the mother of the character Baldur, is someone named Frigg. And she is what I would say friggin' ugly. I mean, she does not look like a woman at all. And it's like, okay, she has long hair, and apart from that, she doesn't look like a woman. And then there's other elements within the game in general that just make me question, like, what were you thinking, Ubisoft? I mean, It's basically inserting modern ideologies into an old game with Vikings, and I just rolled my eyes and shook my head when those things came up, because it's like, this is not the kind of stuff they would say back in these old times, even though the Vikings, before Christianity was introduced to them and everything, were certainly not Christian people, with Christian morals. There's just certain things that are not the kind of thing that you would ever hear coming out of these people's mouths. It's just the kind of stuff that is clearly modern influence that's just nonsense. And but considering the fact that that's not the bulk of the game, I just kind of roll my eyes and move on, and that's all I really can do in that situation. There was a lot of stuff. There was some of that stuff in Odyssey. I mean, Odyssey had quite a lot of its own, and some of it was rather egregious in my opinion. But I think they've added more of that to this game than what was in Odyssey, just with a different emphasis, I guess you could say. But I still enjoyed the gameplay enough, and I'm not looking at this as, oh, this is going to be a super deep game and I'm going to love every second of it. But I still expect that it'll be something I enjoy, and it's a good one that I can just kind of mindlessly play. It's something good to play while I'm listening to stuff in the background, and the wife and I always like to listen to stuff in the evenings, so works out from that standpoint. There is one last game that I played a little bit just today, and it was like, I played like 30 minutes. It's just a demo of a game I came across that's supposed to be heavily inspired by Super Metroid, called Acrolite. And this game, it's interesting. It's one of the first times I've ever seen a game actually say it's recommended to use mouse and keyboard, even though it's a 2D Metroidvania. And I will definitely say what I've played of this, noting once again, it's a 2D Metroidvania, pixel art style, very obviously heavily inspired by Super Metroid. They have nailed the aesthetic and the environments and just the overall feel of it. And of course, it does, at least when it comes to the aiming side of things, it is definitely way better with a mouse aiming than with a joystick. But it works just fine with the joystick as well, because I played it mostly with the Steam controller and then a little bit with the mouse and keyboard. Really, the one problem with mouse and keyboard is honestly just some of the platforming is a little bit harder to do with a keyboard than it is otherwise. So I haven't fully settled on how I would play this overall, but I do intend to at least play through the rest of the demo. And this game doesn't have any sort of release date yet. It's just, you can add it to your wish list on Steam, and there's a demo on there. And that's about the extent of it. I didn't get very far into it. I mean, like I said, I played about half an hour. I managed to get a couple of abilities, one of which is just like a boost that helps you cross gaps and get over like disappearing blocks. And then there's something that was a little more interesting of an ability is a camera type ability, where basically you can, when you're on a square of the map, because it has a classic 2D Metroid map, you can take a picture of the environment, and so then when you look at your map on the map screen, you can actually see everything that's in there, instead of it just being like a single colored square with maybe an item icon. So you can actually see what's there, which I think could be useful for one, if it's just like, okay, there's a collectible I want to get to here, and I want to see, where that what collectible is in this square, or if there's like a wall here that has particular that you need a specific ability to get through, and that sort of thing. So I think that those aspects can be pretty useful. I definitely got lost a lot in this, and I feel like the platforming could be better but I think also the big thing right now is just because I don't have much of any like momentum or like movement related abilities yet, with the exception of just like you start out by default with the ability to grapple on ledges or to grab on ledges. And you have, a pretty high single jump, but you don't have like a double jump, and there's no sort of screw attack thing yet, obviously. Nothing equivalent to a morph ball or morph ball bombs yet. You basically just walk around with a shotgun. Well, it's not really a shotgun. It kind of looks like a shotgun, but it acts more like an auto rifle or like a pulse rifle. And your character basically looks like a space pirate, really. So, but like I said, they really have nailed the aesthetic, and just the environments and everything. Like, this feels like it's very heavily inspired by Super Metroid, and this is one I'm definitely going to be keeping my eyes on. Once I get through the demo, I'll know better about whether this would be something that I might do as a day one kind of purchase, because I do really like the aesthetic and the environments and everything else. Visual effects, all that is just really, really nice. Because like, this is the kind of thing, if they remade Super Metroid in this style, where it basically just felt like a modernized version of Super Metroid, with modernized controls, but still had that, really nice aesthetic that has that, I can't think of the right words for it, but has the same environmental kind of thing, but obviously still maintains the soundtrack for Super Metroid and everything, because it's a fantastic soundtrack. That is the one way I could see myself being like, okay, I am in favor of this remake of Super Metroid. Otherwise, I don't want them to touch Super Metroid. But yeah, I guess that's really all there is to say. I didn't play anything else other than booting up Banjo-Kazooie briefly just to get some footage on my desktop.
All right. Well, I will say, gentlemen, you have my curiosity, but now you have my attention. As soon as you said Super Metroid was inspired, I immediately went ahead and looked the game up on Steam, and I must say, I like what I see based on the trailer footage that I see. I mean, it looks definitely like Super Metroid, but also seems very fast paced too at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the simple fact that you're not limited on your frame rate either, you can do an uncapped frame rate, is huge. Like, I think by default it's 60 FPS would be the cap, but if you uncap the frame rate, you can just go to whatever you're able to do. So, of course, in my case, well, I only played it on my laptop, and my laptop doesn't seem to be recognizing the 240 hertz refresh rate on my monitor, so it's just doing 120, but 120 is still extremely good.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I could definitely see why they would recommend a mouse and keyboard for this one. I mean, it's to a degree, the free aim does kind of remind me of what you had in Samus Returns and Metroid Dread with the free aim, but this seems to be more precise, I guess you could say. And it reminds me of the 2D Metroid Prime sort of game trailer that was released some years ago, just because of how precise the aiming was for that. So I can definitely see why they would recommend a mouse. Yeah, it's something where I would probably have to see it, where I would say, let me try using the Steam controller touchpad or the Steam Deck touchpad and see if that makes a difference.
I tried that a little bit. Definitely need to up the sensitivity to make it worthwhile, though, because when I had the right trackpad set as mouse, it was not sensitive enough. And so I think if I bump up the sensitivity, it should be better, but I'll just have to play around with that and see what I can figure out.
Yeah. But it definitely looks good, and so I'm definitely glad you even brought that up, because I will say, while there are Metroidvanias out there, I would say there are very few Metroid-ish Metroidvanias. I mean, I would say
Mm-hmm.
there are more Castlevania Metroidvanias out there than there
Right.
are actual Metroidvania. So
Yeah.
seeing one and seeing one that looks this good is very inspiring to me, and I really love to see this. So I will also keep my eyes on this. At some point I'll go ahead and download the demo and give that a try. But this definitely looks good, and I am very interested in this as well. So let me go ahead and take care of that. But yeah, definitely, I definitely like that. Going back, I had a question about bleh. Oh yeah, so regarding the DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, so were you able to go back to the base game, or did you just go ahead and
Yeah.
complete the DLC?
No, I couldn't beat the boss. I wasn't doing nearly enough damage to him, and he was hitting pretty hard. But more annoyingly, the arena that he was in, if you got knocked backwards, it's surrounded by pools of lava. And it's just like lava on the ground, but it burns you up so fast that it was like, okay, this isn't working. And then when I looked it up, people basically said, you're supposed to play it after you complete the main campaign. It's like, okay, that makes sense. And I'm nowhere near that, so.
And do you think this is a game where, sort of like with Origins, you'll play up to a certain point until you get like everything, not necessarily 100%, but to your satisfaction?
Very, very possibly. This one actually has more of like a proper checklist than Odyssey did. So that definitely motivates me more to actually take the time to go through the whole thing and, get everything. But I'm definitely looking at this much like I did with Odyssey, where it's not something that I expect to be even close to finishing this year. It'd be more like I'll probably just work on this, little by little over the years, just whenever I'm in the mood to play something like that.
Okay.
All right. Anything else?
No, sir.
Oh, I do want to mention briefly, just because I forgot to mention it, that I did play some more Salt and Sacrifice today. I ended up coming back to it and sort of making a little more progress. Not significantly so. I mean, basically, I just kind of fought a few more mages and got a little more past my frustration with the one unnamed one that kept popping up, and instead was able to actually just play for a bit. I need to probably, well, for one, I need to pull up the map again and see if there's anything else I can do in the current area I'm in, because I know that there's an ability I don't have yet that I'm going to need. But it's very possible that it won't be until I actually get another ability that I can finish up everything in that area that I'm in. But there's other areas I unlocked that I can go to as well, so I'll probably just end up doing that. But I think I'm probably going to be like switching back and forth between Salt and Sacrifice and Valhalla, just depending on what I'm more in the mood to play at the time, or probably more likely how frustrated I am with Salt and Sacrifice will determine whether I'm playing more of Valhalla.
Okay. And since you mentioned that, I actually did have another question I forgot to ask. What's Salt and Sacrifice? So you mentioned you had to look up a map. Did the physical version not include a map like Sanctuary did?
No, it did not, unfortunately. And actually, I can't even remember if Salt and Sanctuary included a physical map or not. I think it might have been like I think it might be like if you got the version on its own rather than the collection that it might have, like that there was like a Uber version or something. But I honestly don't remember. I have to just grab it off my shelf and check. But yeah, so for anyone who didn't see this, because I can't remember if I actually showed it on screen, but there's the physical Switch versions of the two games. And obviously when I played Salt and Sanctuary, I played that on Steam, and no, it did not come with a map.
Okay.
So yeah, neither one. I mean, Salt and Sacrifice came with like a booklet, which is kind of odd that Salt and Sacrifice came with the booklet, even though it doesn't have much to it. And then Salt and Sanctuary did not come with anything. That is odd. I thought that it had something, but apparently it did not. Yeah, I would love to have like a big physical map that I could just hang up on the wall when I'm playing it, but apparently that's not an option. So. All right, well, let's get into the news. So we've got kind of more PlayStation-centric news this week, but not in the same sense. So it's kind of both PlayStation and PC news at the same time, with 2 out of 3 of these stories. But I want to start off with one that was really surprising to me, and one of the 2 that was really surprising to me, and a very pleasant surprise. And that is the fact that we've been talking about all these PC decompilations that we've had for N64 games, a few GameCube games, some PS2 games, a couple 360 games. But we didn't think that there was much of any possibility that PlayStation 3 would be getting recomps anytime soon. But it's being worked on, and it may not be as far away as we originally thought. So, as of right now, it's basically just tools are being developed to make it possible that figure out ways to essentially translate stuff from the cell processor over to x86, which is basically to translate that for people who don't understand these things, who have no familiarity with PCE versus PlayStation 3 and everything. It basically will make it so that instead of games being CPU dependent, they will be GPU dependent, which means that you don't have to have a super strong machine in order to be able to run these games. Whereas right now with PS3 emulation, because emulation is very dependent on your processor, your CPU, it tends to be more difficult to run some of those games, and some of them just don't run well at all. Like you'll have some games that will run well even on the Steam Deck, like as an example, you'll have Demon's Souls where you can run that easily at 60 FPS on the Steam Deck, or like the God of War collection, or the Metal Gear Solid collection, although there's not much point to that anymore with some of the games already being on PC natively, and then the second collection including the last game that isn't on PC natively. But anyway, the whole thing with this is the fact that now there's going to be, at some point, we don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but it's at least being heavily worked on, recompilations of PS3 games on PC. And that means that it's very possible that within a year, maybe 2, I think actually it wouldn't surprise me if it's a year based on how quickly the progress went with the emulation of PS4 games. But I think that based on this recompilation thing, it basically would make it so that there are native PC versions of PlayStation 3 games, which includes, most importantly, those games that have never gone anywhere but PS3, including Sony's very own first-party games. So we could have games like the Killzone games, the Infamous games, the Sly Cooper games, the Jak and Daxter games, or not Jak and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank games. We could have the original trilogy of Uncharted could come over. There's any number of different ones. Right now, there's no indication that anything specific is being worked on other than just trying to make the tool that will do the work, essentially. But regardless, this could be quite huge. So, apart from what I've said, I definitely have more thoughts, but why don't you take it away?
Yeah, when you shared that, it was definitely surprising. I mean, I never would have expected this to get this, especially so soon. I mean, considering the fact that Sony is like, man, it's so hard for us to make PS5 versions of these PS3 games because the process were so hard to work with the PS3. It's just impossible for us to do this. sorry guys, we can't give you these ports, you know, we're sorry guys, you know, we can give you the you know, the PS3 eShop versions. You can play that if you want, but we can't give you any native versions or any improved versions. And meanwhile, you've got these people doing
Well, you can't play PS3 games on PS5, period.
Well then, so yeah, so meanwhile, you got these people who aren't a multi-billion-dollar business, you know, in the confines of their homes, just tip-tap typing away, without any prospect of making money on this, off of this, and they're doing the impossible. They're translating this from the original, what was it, like Jaguar processors to
Cell processor.
You know, cell processors to you know, x86, which is the same architecture that the PS5 uses. So they're doing what Sony is not doing, which is just insane. And like you said, this is huge because not only does this mean we don't have to worry about emulation, we will just have native PC ports. Like, this is native. So like you said, we don't have to worry about, oh, is my processor powerful enough to run this game? It's a matter of, all right, is your hardware just, you know, basic stuff? Is it simple enough? Can it run this game? If it's decent enough, if it came out within this past, I mean, granted, these are PS3 games, so probably even older than that. If it came out, you know, say 2020-ish, you'll definitely be fine. And because it's PS3, maybe even earlier than that. But
Oh, PS3, it's 2006 to 2013.
Yeah, you're gonna be pretty good. Yeah, so definitely you can go back further than that. And so the Steam Deck will be able to run these games pretty well. So games that might have struggled before shouldn't have a problem at all and should be doing, you know, a whole lot better. You'll have better support with, you know, say resolution, maybe with like texture mod, even just modding. It'll be easier to do that as well because it's just a native version of the game, or the games, I'll say. And like you said, games that weren't able to be ported over or haven't been ported over will have access to those games. So that's incredible. And, you know, for people who have wanted to play and have had issues for one reason or another to play, say, Demon Souls on PC, you know, being able to play that now without any hassle. Well, we'll have to worry about this. I was going to say Metal Gear Solid 4, but hey, we've got that coming natively, so thank you, Konami, for that. But it's gonna be amazing. You know, the original God of War games, you know, well, remastered 1 and 2, and then also 3, which was PS3 only. No, that gets brought over. It's just great. Now, I do think this will probably be, at the very least, sure, the tools are there. But I probably would say it's going to be at least maybe 3 years before we start seeing stuff come over. I could be wrong, but it might be a while longer than, say, it has been for the GameCube and the and the PS2, PS1, N64, and SNES recomps that we've had. I mean, I would love to be proven wrong. If they do come over a whole lot sooner, that's great. I would definitely welcome that, but I'm just a bit skeptical as far as to how soon we could be getting those games, but it's great. And I mean, also in light of the PS3 shop being shut down, you know, hey, these games are going away, and Sony has no intention of allowing people to have access to these games. So it's like, okay, cool, we will just recomp them ourselves. Fine, we'll do it ourselves.
Right. Again, yeah.
Again. So I mean, it's great. I love this. It's probably one of the things I would say would be among the most impossible, but the impossible is being done. So I'm all for that. And if it means, like I said, if it means not having to worry about, oh, can my CPU run this game without having too many issues? And I mean, also, well, that'll obviously come sooner or later, but I mean, hey, if we're able to get, and sure, it's been a long while since it's probably been developed, but if we're able to start getting PS3 decomps now, I wonder how long it could take for us to, say, get, dare I say, PS4 recomps and not have to worry about having a special version of Shad PS4 just to get Bloodborne running. I mean, that's going to be obvious in the future.
I think current versions of Shad PS4 have incorporated a lot of those changes from the various forks to make those games run better. I just haven't tested them myself.
Okay, well, that's definitely good at least then. But if that does happen, though, that'll definitely be a major win in that area. But yeah, it's good stuff all around, and I am glad to see that this is making a lot of progress.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those things that I did not expect to actually happen. I mean, I should say, I did not expect it to happen anytime soon. I figured it would probably be multiple years before anyone started to figure out how to crack through that and to figure that out, because it just, it's all gotten more complicated. And of course, the cell processor was so much different. It's like it was both a technical feat in terms of everything it could do, but it was also a huge nightmare for developers because it was so different from the PowerPC architecture that you had with Xbox and with Nintendo. And the thing is that now, if this is actually happening, which, I mean, I believe that people have been able to at least start to figure out what they need to do. If people are motivated enough, they can make this happen. I mean, we've seen what motivated people can do with games with Bloodborne. Bloodborne is a perfect example. And yes, that's still emulation, and it still has the CPU issue because the fact that it's emulation rather than a native version. But what I love about this, regardless of how long it takes, which I think it's going to be a lot sooner than what I originally expected, just the simple fact that this is actually being worked on, I think we could see at least one game within the next year. Now, I don't know what game that's going to be. I'm not really sure what would be the priority for people. Personally, selfishly, I want it to be the Infamous games because I love those games. I have my physical PS3 copy of those games. In fact, I have quite a few PS3 games that I would love to see native recomps of. But I just I really, my brain's not working clearly. I see this as a huge win for PC gamers. Now, and I think for PlayStation gamers who decide to make the switch over with PlayStation getting rid of physical games, this could be huge for them as well. Because as much as we rag on what PlayStation is now and what it's become, like, I will never deny that PS1, PS2, PS3, and to a good extent, PS4 had really good games. Now, I still own all of those consoles. I still have my original PS1 that I got back in 2000 or 2001. My original PS2 PS2 Slim that I got in 2006. My PS3 Slim, which is actually right behind me, gets used every week for watching DVDs and Blu-rays that I've had since 2011, I think. And then I have my PS4 that I got in 2015. And I've been using all of these, or rather, I've had these all this time, and there are a number of great games on all of those platforms. Even if some of them I didn't really get to experience at the time, because like my PS2, I got really late. The PS3, I got relatively late, but I still was able to experience a lot more PlayStation games at that time and experience a lot of the ones that I've grown to really love. But seeing the option of these things coming over to PC, especially with Sony pulling away from PC ports of their single-player games, and the fact that even if they hadn't pulled away from their ports of to PC, they probably never would have done these older games. PC gamers are doing what PlayStation won't do. And PlayStation had the opportunity to earn money from us. Yep. So many of us would have happily bought a lot of these games, especially something like the Uncharted collection. I mean, I think the Nathan Drake collection would have been the perfect way for them to do it, because it's like it was already on PS4. So it was off of the cell architecture. There's no way that it would have been difficult for them to get it ported over, but they didn't want to for whatever reason. Instead, they just gave us Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy. And so then we end up with a situation where you don't have all these games prior, and you want people to just jump in on 4, which was a stupid idea. You have Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which I enjoyed that game a great deal, but even though that one may not be as story dependent, it's still most likely PC gamers would have been more excited about playing the older games versus starting with the new one, even though the new one was good. And, you know, the lists go on, but the fact of the matter is, if these recomps are actually happening for PS3 games, this is going to be the way that these games get preserved. This is going to be the way that we make sure that more people have the ability to play these games. And I look forward to assuming the recomps start happening and we actually get native PS3 PC ports, I look forward to playing these games on my Steam Deck. Every single one of them. And then at the same time, transferring my save over to my desktop and playing them at native 1440p with visual mods if I so choose, even if I don't choose that, and, you know, playing at 240 frames per second. I mean, like, I look forward to all these different things that could potentially happen with these games that Sony just doesn't care about, and they don't care about their customers. And PC gamers are doing what PlayStation will not do, as I've said before. So, it's like we've talked about in the past. You know, fine, we'll do it ourselves. And that's really what it comes down to. So, Sony can keep their overpriced console. They can keep screwing over their customers for people who are actually willing to stick around and stay with them. But for those of us who are on PC, we're still going to play your games whether you give them to us or not. And I'm definitely in a spot where I have zero problem with the idea of I will buy the game. If I can buy the game, I will buy the game. If the game is not possible to buy except through a scalper, I'm not going to buy it. But if it's a game that I can still purchase today, I will happily go ahead and buy it, and then I'll emulate it. And that is perfectly fine with me. And, I mean, most of the PS3 games I already own anyway. I have the physical copies. I can rip the physical copies myself. I already did that with multiple games that I own. But I definitely would be more likely to just, back up. I look forward to the day when I have the ability to play some of these games natively on PC, because PlayStation's not going to give them to me, so I'll let other people do the work, and we'll get those ports. So, I babbled a whole lot, but the TLDL of it is that I am excited about this, and even if it takes a little while, I'm still excited about it.
One thing you mentioned, which I think is also sort of interesting, is for those who, for those on PS5 who are able to, I think, essentially jailbreak their PS5s and install Linux, they'll essentially be able to play the PS3 games that way.
Yeah,
so
that's
it's like,
true.
again, Sony, you could have been doing this for your own customers, and they have to go out of their way to play these games that you will not put on the PS5 for them, which is funny. Because they definitely would have given you your money.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they would have done that, but you decided not to do it. So,
yep.
Another lost market.
Yep. For sure. All right. You want to cover the next topic?
All right. So, in relation again to Sony, sort of bad news on this end, and that is that a European Union commissioner has said that Sony cannot be stopped from getting rid of their physical game discs and only offering their games as digital. So Stop Killing Games would not be able to prevent this from happening. And this is coming from Video Games Chronicle, and the EU Commissioner for Democracy, Michael McGrath, EU Commissioner for Democracy, Justice, the Rule of Law, and Consumer Protection, was talking about physical games being, or Sony's plans to stop offering physical games. And he said that within the law, they're able to stop offering them. He said, quote, "It does come down to commercial and contractual freedoms, and companies are free to offer games and services in the manner that they see fit, provided that consumer rights are fully protected in line with national and EU law. At this time, we did have to consider European citizens' initiative on this question of whether games should continue to be available after a new edition of a game has been brought forward." And so, until as a result, also another market analyst, Dr. Serkan Toto, said that Sony is unlikely to change its mind about killing discs even if users cancel PS Plus to fight against it. There was a petition made to fight against Sony stopping producing discs, and I believe the petition so far has had about or more than 285,000 signatures, which is definitely more from when I originally saw it. I think there was like probably around 10,000, so it's definitely gained a whole lot of momentum since then. But yeah, he said, Dr. Toto said that Sony has over 120 million active PlayStation users, around 50 million people subscribe to PlayStation Plus. As a thought experiment, let's say 500,000 cancel in protest. That would just be 1% of that business gone. Of course, not enough to Sony to start rethinking. Digital is just too lucrative. And yeah, there's definitely a whole lot of you can say about this. But before I get into my thoughts, what do you think about this happening especially with what has been said about the law not being against Sony on this end?
I can't say I'm surprised by it. I think it sucks for sure, but I don't know what more can be done from that standpoint. I do think in terms of the idea of people voting with their wallets and everything, people canceling subscriptions to PlayStation Plus, I think that it's going to take a lot to convince arrogant Sony, because right now they're being arrogant Sony, like they were in the early of the PS3 generation. It's going to take a lot to convince them to make any sort of change. And even then, I think it's very unlikely that we'll see any sort of change. I think there should be a change. There's no reason why they shouldn't continue to make physical discs. It's unfortunate that Stop Killing Games basically has been told, hey, we can't, from a law standpoint, stop them from getting rid of physical games, but I still think that gamers need to speak up how they can, and not just on Twitter, not just with petitions, but with how they spend their money. If they stop buying the PlayStation games, if they cancel their PlayStation Plus subscription, if they refuse to buy the PlayStation 6, those could be the things that convince PlayStation to maybe change course. But even then, I'm still really skeptical, because it just seems like this is what they want to do. Sony is in that spot where they are extremely arrogant. They recognize that a lot of PlayStation users have put a lot of money into the ecosystem, have essentially attached themselves fully to the ecosystem, and they are not going to just back out. I think that, frankly, PlayStation is becoming, if they have not already to some degree become, the Apple of gaming. The difference, though, is that Apple at least actually has good security, like proper, actually, although they way overcharge for everything, they do at least make solid products. It's just they're overpriced, but they're well made. and their ecosystem is very well interconnected. It's very secure. I mean, like, as an example of how secure it is, my dad had this old iPod Touch that we found going through drawers after my mom died, because, you know, they're both gone. We just go through and figure out who goes to what, or what goes to who, and everything. And I found this iPod Touch, and I wanted to just go through it and check out stuff because it was my dad's. My mom didn't use it at all after he died, and the only way for me to be able to get in, I have to be able to either have the correct password, which the password I had was not the correct password, or have to be able to, I mean, they send a confirmation to help get stuff reset to my mom's email address, but the password I have for that is wrong. So the only way for me to get into that account is with a court order. So I can't do anything with my dad's old iPod Touch, short of getting a court order, you know, with presumably death certificate and everything else. And so for me, it sucks from that standpoint. But for users who get their stuff stolen, that's very, very good. It's very good that they have these great security features in place. PlayStation does not have that at all. Their security is garbage. They have not proven themselves to be reliable when it comes to taking care of their customers' accounts, their data, everything else. And the simple fact that the only reason, like, when Colin Moriarty got his account hacked, the only reason he was able to get his account back as quickly as he did, and possibly get his account back at all, was because he's Colin Moriarty. It's only because of that, because he is essentially the pony general, the leader of all ponies. And while I think Colin Moriarty, despite my personal feelings towards him in terms of arrogance and everything else, despite the negative things that I think about him, I do believe he is a very smart guy, and he's largely a very reasonable guy. He's just wrong a lot. But I do think that he is... I respect him in many ways. I just don't agree with him in many ways. But the fact that this guy, who is absolutely, you know, like, top of the food chain when it comes to the PlayStation fans and fanboys, and that even he got his account hacked super easily. He could have lost everything, because if someone can take the account, they could just delete the account before PlayStation even gets a chance to recover it, potentially. If that happens, whatever you bought on PlayStation is gone, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, of course, obviously, I would absolutely encourage, if someone gets their account hacked, they need to do everything they can immediately to try to get it taken care of. But if it just happens and they have no way to get it back because PlayStation's security is so lax, I can't imagine trying to stick with that system and everything else. Like, and even if you're a fan of their first party titles, their first party titles are so few and far between these days. It's like, what are you sticking around for? Like, yeah, you have Wolverine coming up. You theoretically have Intergalactic coming up, although, depending on whether the rumors are true, which I'm skeptical about, if Neil Druckmann got fired, which, once again, this is a rumor, I have no idea if it's true. I'm very skeptical, but if Intergalactic got canceled, then you'd be losing that. And so then what do you have left? It's like there's supposed to be like some other Insomniac projects down the line at some point, like a Venom game, maybe an X-Men game. And it's like, okay, you might have those. Maybe eventually a Horizon 3. But the fact is that you're betting a lot on that. And then on top of that, with Sony killing all these physical games, that also means that you're going to be limited to, you can only buy stuff from their store, which means they can make whatever price they want, and it may not be like a drastic increase. It's not going to be Last of Us Part 3 is $300, but they can still increase the prices as much as they want, and there's nothing you can do about it if you stay with them. I mean, I hope that more and more people will wise up and just be like, maybe it's time to move over, or at the very least, mod their PS5s to have Linux running on them, and then at least they have some actual ownership of their digital games. They can keep everything they have. They can continue to play their PS5 games natively. Whenever the PS3 recomps become available, they can start playing those natively on their PS5, which their PS5 will easily be able to play those at 4K 60. Easily. Even with its CPU limitations, it will still be able to play those games beautifully once it has once they're native versions. But I just, from talking to PlayStation fans, because of how they feel about that ecosystem, I think that more of them are not going to make that change. And I know a lot of it also has to do with, I mean, it's not just having invested in that system, but it's also a question, it's also just a matter of they are, I guess, kind of attached to it. You could even say some sort of emotional attachment, and some of that, makes sense to a degree, especially people who have been with PlayStation since the very beginning, whether they were exclusively PlayStation or not. It's hard to just leave that behind. It's like for me, when it comes to Nintendo, like I've been a Nintendo fan for the past 30 years. Well, not quite 30 years, because I really got more into Nintendo in 1999 when I got my N64. Um, but even still, like, I really dislike what Nintendo does. And yes, I have the Switch 2 because I bought it at launch, regretted it for a while, and now I'm just kind of like, I have it. I just have it, and that's all there is to it at this point. Like, I'll buy some games, but I mean, I compare the number of games I bought for the Switch 1 versus what I bought for the Switch 2, and I have not. The only actual like Switch 2 game I bought, and that was only because it was bundled with the system, was Mario Kart World. And that, if it hadn't been bundled with the system for $30 cheaper than buying it physical, I might not have even gotten it. And apart from that, it's just been upgrades of Switch 1 games to Switch 2 versions. And I don't regret necessarily buying those, but I compare the number of games I bought in the first year of the Switch 1 Switch 2 versus Switch 1. And it's a dramatic difference. Now, granted, obviously the big difference there was the fact that Switch 1, it was like that I didn't have a handheld PC, there weren't any that were reasonably priced at the time. And so this was like, I can play so many of these third-party games that I have on PC on a handheld device, which is my preferred way to play. And so I bought a lot of them that way. And like, I was counting up my physical Switch games the other day. I have like 130 physical Switch games. And I have not bought a single physical Switch game for Switch 2. Now, there are some that I will eventually buy when the price goes down enough, ones that are fully on cartridge, like, for example, Indiana Jones and Lies of P and probably Fallout 4, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, things like that. Like, I will buy those because they're fully on cart when the price goes down, but I'm not spending the $70 for those. It's too much for a 30 FPS game. It's not worth it to me. But I would like to have those for my collection because they're fully on cart. It's a full ownership of those games. But I'm not going to do that with... I'm not going to buy the key cards because those don't interest me. Like, I have, I think, 2 games on the original Switch that were essentially key cards. And I got those very cheap. But I'm not going to do that with Switch 2 because it's just... There's no benefit to it anymore. I mean, if it's basically a digital game, what benefit do I gain with that? Maybe a little bit better performance and visuals on the Switch 2 versus the Steam Deck. But whenever eventually the Steam Deck 2 comes out, assuming prices are actually normalized by then, I'll probably get better performance there with a game that I've already purchased versus having to buy a separate copy that has these limits and will never go past these limits unless I pay for an upgrade fee on a future console, which I probably won't even get. Anyway, I'm all over the place. That is tonight for sure, all over the place, but it just I'm frustrated on behalf of PlayStation gamers. And they may think that it's, fake outrage or whatever. And it's like, it's not even really outrage. Like, I'm not, crashing out or anything, but I'm still frustrated about it because I see people getting screwed over so much, and so many of them either don't care, have gaslit themselves into believing that it's actually a good thing, or they have just resigned themselves to this reality because they don't want to move to what they think is a more complicated platform of PC. And it is to a degree, but nowhere near as much as they think it is. It's a lot easier transition than they believe it will be. They'll just miss out on the first-party PlayStation games until they get native PC ports or emulation, as we'll be talking about later. But yeah. All right. I'm done. You're up.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised by this. I mean, considering the fact that Stop Killing Games was shut down by the EU last month after a meeting that they weren't included in, and Ubisoft also was one of the people who were part of the meeting, and it was just all hush hush. I definitely am. I wouldn't put it past Ubisoft to have slid a few euros here and there and said, hey, you need to take care of this for us, okay? So yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. So because Stop Killing Games was shut down just in general by the EU, I definitely am not surprised that they're also stopping, or they're allowing Sony to stop producing discs, which on one hand I can kind of, not that I'm saying I agree with it, I can understand or at least the rationale that was presented, because for one thing, by saying as long as what was the exact word saying, companies offer game services in matter that respect the consumer rights, it's kind of okay, I understand that to a degree, because you would sort of say, all right, indies need to provide physical games. Well, not every indie game on the PS5 has a physical. They're pretty much, many are just digital only. So I can understand that, saying hey, because for whatever reason, as long as you can sell the game and it's reasonable, you can do it. So I can understand. At the same time, though, I'm not saying I agree with that, though, because especially since a company like Sony cannot be compared with a small indie developer, which has to put out those resources to produce a physical game, especially since Sony is the co-patent owner, of the Blu-ray disc. So they definitely have the resources for that. But I can at least understand that thinking. But the real thing, though, is just that it really just comes down to ownership. Because say Sony just has stuff be digital, sure, fine and dandy. But what will you do to make sure that gamers actually own their PS5 games? There's nothing they're doing that suggests, hey, it's going to be like GOG, where you can install the games, you can back them up to a drive, store them away for whatever, come back years later and just pop it in, and you're good to go. I mean, additionally, on that end, it's also with, well, unlike with, PC, there's really no real way to back up games or to find games or archive them and come back years later anyway. So physical really is the best way to go for console if you want to make sure you actually own your games. For what it's worth. And
well, at least unless you mod your console.
Yeah, unless you do that. So you're really stuck between a rock and a hard place on that end. But even then, gamers shouldn't have to go to that length just to make sure they have their games, though.
Right.
That's the sad part. But I really think that Sony is going to get away with it. Like you said, having the protests is not enough. Having the petition is not enough, and trying to ratio Sony and PlayStation on Twitter and get community notes from what I've seen is not enough either.
Yeah.
Especially like Dr. Toto said, 500,000 is just 1% of the entire market that Sony has. And additionally, I feel like if you would really want to make a statement, cancel your pre-orders of GTA 6. Like, GTA 6 is the sort of catalyst for this whole thing. And the fact that it sold extremely well.
Yeah.
And it's definitely guaranteed to have made its money back and then some by the time the game launches.
Yeah.
Just goes to show you that Sony definitely can get away with it, because you allowed saying like, oh, but it's GTA 6, it's Rockstar. Well, keep that same energy. If you want these games to stay physical, then demand that Rockstar makes the game physical. It's not enough for, just to say, okay, we're gonna fight against Sony, guys. Okay, Sony, you should do this, okay? But in the meantime, though, I'm gonna pre-order GTA 6 and play this because I really want to, and I'm gonna let them get an exception. It's like, well, I really don't like this, but I'll let you get away with it, though, Rockstar, because I really want to play this game, and so you can accept. Okay, here's my money. All right, go on, you slide dog, you.
Yeah.
They really are not keeping that same energy, and they have to, because if, like I said, Rockstar, I'm sure Sony probably has had this operation going on for a while in the background, especially since they've been transitioning their facilities over to developing micro lenses. But the fact that Rockstar was able to announce this and did not get much backlash, minimal backlash, goes to show that people either don't care, or they're just fine with it, or they're just welcome it with open arms. So I definitely don't see, even if EU was to say something, it really wouldn't make much of a difference in the long term, or even in a midterm, just because, sure, they'll say, all right, we might bump it up to, say, a couple more years, maybe 2030, 2032, but after that, it's like, okay, we're just gonna go back and do what we originally were going to do in the first place.
Yeah.
And just because gamers were just saying, like, we'll give an exception to this one game. So they've already spoken with their wallets, and they are going to allow this to happen, which is just insane to think. And one thing that I forgot to mention this last week, but with the whole Sony killing discs, is I wonder what this would mean for future emulation, because you don't actually have the discs anymore. How could you get the actual game data? And especially if Sony decides, hey, we're going to go and introduce DRM into our games, like, that's going to make emulation on digital probably would make it a whole lot harder to do. So, like, say the PS6 could be a digital only platform, and how would you go about working on that? That's something that would be very challenging, I would think. So,
well, I mean, they just have to jailbreak it. That's really what it comes down to. They have to figure out how to jailbreak it, and then when they do that, then they can get the files on the internet, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's just overall something that is just not going to be good, and
Yeah, and something that I do want to say is that even though I'm not sure, I mean, like, I don't think Sony's going to necessarily reverse course. However, I do not think people who have been speaking out against this have been doing everything that they've been doing. I don't think they should stop trying. I think they should just keep trying, because, at least you can say in the end that you fought for it. You fought against it, and that you did what you could do. And there may be only so much you can do. Your drop in the bucket may not matter too much to them, but the fact of the matter is you can at least sleep at night knowing that you did what you I mean, that you tried to fight back. I don't think people should just completely give up. I think that they should continue to bombard the social media posts. I think that's actually a good thing, because the reality is, yeah, even though they're probably mostly going to ignore it, if it continues long enough, there may come a point when shareholders start saying, hey, we're seeing these cancellations. We're seeing it in the news constantly that your social media, all of your social media posts are getting bombarded because you're refusing to address this situation. I mean, will any of that happen? I don't know. But the only way that you can know for sure is to just keep trying. Now, I'm not in a position where I can do more than say what I am saying now, because I don't have a PlayStation 5. Sony probably already knows that they pretty much lost me as a customer. You know, that I have my PS4 and my PS Vita. Eventually I'm going to mod both my PS4 and my PS3. I just need to find a working mod for those, but I haven't updated either system in well over a year, so theoretically it should be possible now to get an exploit to finally get those modded. But I think that the only way that at least there's any chance of anything happening is if people continue to speak up and continue to fight against it, because there have been plenty of situations where enough people have spoken up and it's gotten companies to reverse course, including Sony, like with the whole Helldivers thing. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but you know, you won't know if you don't try. So I just hope more people than not will actually, at the very minimum, even if they don't want to get on Twitter or whatever and flood social media posts and all that stuff, if they simply cancel their PlayStation Plus subscription, don't buy GTA 6 like you said, including canceling the pre-orders, and just stop giving Sony money. If you find ways to stop giving Sony money, at some point, enough of those cancellations that happen, enough of these things happen, it could pile up to the point where maybe Sony finally gets to a point of saying, shoot, we screwed this up. We need to reverse course before we lose any more. Now, yes, my cynical side is thinking it's not going to make a difference as much as but I still think that people better try, because I would rather be proven wrong about this than tell people, hey, just don't even try. I think everybody should keep trying, especially those who have already been trying. People who are really bothered by this, they need to do something different, because the only way that you can know in the end whether or not it makes a difference is if you actually try. But I've said my piece.
Same here.
All right, so we have one final topic, and this is a more positive topic. I figured we'd end on a good note. So with Sony shutting down, getting rid of physical games and everything, probably making PlayStation 6 a digital-only console, there are multiple, not one, but multiple PlayStation 5 emulators being worked on right now. And although most games that they've tested have not yet been able to do more than just get the games to boot, there has been at least one example, I only know of one so far, where people have actually been able to start playing the game, and that's with Dead Cells. Now, Dead Cells obviously is not a demanding game by any stretch. It can run at, 60 FPS easily on the Switch. So, playing it on PC at 60 FPS is nothing. Obviously, there's native versions, but it's still progress. And I believe, actually, the challenge that people are trying to do with these multiple emulators going at once is trying to get it running to the point where they'll be able to run GTA 6 before it releases on PC. Which, I mean, of course, I don't care at all about GTA 6, but if this is possible, it could be really interesting. Now, one thing I want to clarify on these emulators is that they're not intended to be emulators in the same sense as other ones are. At least from my understanding, what it looks like is that basically they're trying to create a translation layer similar to Proton, so that you can actually natively, well, it's not really natively, but so that you can run the PlayStation 5 game files on PC. So it's not an actual PC port, like a recompilation, but it would be able to run the PlayStation 5 games on PC through an emulator using the original files and everything, although I guess you always use the original files. But regardless of where this is in terms of its progress, the fact that you have 4 different emulators all being worked on right now and all trying to get this done, and the fact that we have at least one game that will actually boot into the game, will actually let you play the game, and others that are only at the boot screen. But I mean, Bloodborne at one point was only at the boot screen too, and then 6 months later it was fully playable and in better shape than it is on consoles. It's certainly possible. So, what are your thoughts on this?
It's definitely fascinating to see this happening, and the fact that there are multiple emulators out there definitely shows that there's a lot of, I guess you could say, demand, but also that people are just are going at their own way. And if they are all, I mean, I don't think I saw anything in the article about this, but if they are all open source, then, you know, that could definitely help with, you know, if some people are having problems with certain features in the code, or, you know, if there's something that could be improved upon in one emulator, you know, everyone can sort of like look at their own homework and see, all right, what are you doing here that's working, what's not working, what can I improve upon, and stuff like that. And that could just probably help speed up the development overall. So I think it's definitely great. And the fact that I mean, it's barely anything, but the fact that we have Bloodborne booting up is definitely a promising sign. And I mean, while it definitely will take time since it is a newer device, considering the fact that it, you know, is using x86 architecture, it's not going to be the same. You're not going to have the same issues as you would with, you know, RPS3. It should be a whole lot simpler. Now, it'll definitely still take time because, you know, even with Shad PS4, that took time to develop, and still has, you know, its quirks and issues here and there, but it's promising. You know, give it, well, I mean, especially since there are three emulators in development right now. 4 emulators right now. Give it, you know, 3 to 5 years. We might have some games that could be considered playable, which I think is definitely great. So I think this is definitely good news. Like you said, for preservation, it's great. It's one step getting closer to playing games that Sony wouldn't release that we wanted. I mean, like Demon's Souls, for example. You know, it's just good news, and so I'm glad to see this is happening. Like I said, it'll be a while, but I think it'll definitely be worth it. Now, I'm hoping that it doesn't require any crazy CPUs, like, since this is a newer piece of hardware, you know, that's going to mean you're going to need more demanding CPUs. So I would say you're going to need a CPU that's released within the past 2 years, probably 2-3 years, to get these games running decently. So we'll see. I mean, theoretically, the PC I'm using now should be able to work, since it is a current generation, you know, Ryzen CPU, but it's still on the budget end, so it's like a 9600X. So we'll see what happens there. I do know, at the very least, though, the main PC I built, that should definitely be suitable-ish enough, since that is on the higher end of things. So that should hopefully work. But yeah, it'll be interesting to know what happens there. So great news. I hope, though, that in the grand scheme of things, you won't necessarily need to have multiple emulators for running multiple games, depending on what it is. I'm hoping that things could eventually get to a point where maybe they just consolidate and have, sort of, I mean, not that I'm saying we shouldn't have multiple ones, but have sort of like a tentpole emulator, sort of like how, our PS3 is the de facto PS3 emulator, or how, SNES 9X or SNE 9X is like the SNES, main emulator and stuff like that. So if we have something like that, I think that would be great. But if not, that's fine. Although I think eventually maybe we could get one that is sort of like the sort of standard PS3 emulator. But hey, baby steps though.
Right.
But all in all, good news.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like of actual PS5 games, I don't know how many I would actually care enough to really want to play. But I love the fact that this is actually being worked on, because it does open the possibility, for one, just of bringing over games that are not coming over to PC otherwise, but also the fact that it is another way to preserve the games, and that's a big thing. Now, I will say for sure that once this actually gets to a state that it's truly usable and everything else, I mean, I think my PC should be more than capable, easily running it, even if it's high CPU requirements, because I have the Ryzen 9 9950X, so I'm in pretty good shape. It's not the top of the line, but it's still very high up there, and it's, it will easily be able to handle pretty much anything I throw at it. But I would definitely say that if this becomes, gets to an acceptable state, a state where everything's running properly the way it's supposed to, rather than just having a bunch of issues, I would be happy to go ahead and buy physical copies of these PS5 games, anything that I would actually want to play, and then just emulate it. I have zero problem doing that, especially because of the fact that theoretically it should be pretty doable. Of course, with PlayStation getting rid of physical games, who knows how easy it will be to get some of these, but I might just have to look on eBay sometime soon and just see, hey, is there a really cheap copy of Demon Souls I can grab, for example? Things like that, where I might consider that. Either that, or I just bite the bullet and go through the PlayStation Store and grab one of those on discount, and then just emulate it. But it's not one of those where it's that big of a deal to me. I would be interested in checking out the Demon Souls remake, but I'm also perfectly fine with just doing the PS3 one, especially because there's mods for it to not only give it better frame rate, but to improve the visuals and the lighting and everything else. So there's definitely a whole lot of different aspects to that. But regardless of any of that, this is just another example of something that, for one, I did not expect this to happen anytime soon, especially since we only barely just started getting proper PS4 emulation. But people are motivated, and this is one situation where I could actually see AI potentially being useful, at the very least to help with recognizing errors in code and being able to pick up on some stuff that people might not otherwise get as easily. But even if you leave that out completely, which obviously would be the better way anyway, the reality is that people are motivated enough to make this happen, and this could be quite huge when it actually gets somewhere. Now, how long is it going to take? No idea. Right now, the only thing that I'm aware of that actually not only boots the game, but is actually playable is Dead Cells. And apart from that, it seems like there's a handful of games that they'll maybe get to shader compilation, and then they just crash after that. So it's still very early in progress, but it would be really funny if people managed to actually get it working well enough to emulate GTA 6 this year. I don't expect it to happen that fast, but it would be hilarious if that happened. Because, of course, the goalposts would have to be moved.
Yep.
And, I mean, some people would be willing to buy the game and then emulate it, if that was an option. I think probably more people would just pirate it and then emulate it, but regardless of any of that, it's just... it's an interesting thought, at least, of this emulation being an option. And it just keeps going back to PC gamers, we'll just do it ourselves. Obviously, you and I are not the ones doing the work, but PC gamers as a whole, you get people who care about this, they care about preservation, they care about proper ownership, and they're willing to do the work. And it's like, you go do the work, I will reap the benefits of it. Now, like I said before, I don't care too much about the majority of PlayStation games that are coming out at this point. The ones that I wanted on PC, I already have. I mean, the only thing that I look at, apart from maybe the Demon Souls remake, is like, I mean, maybe down the line, I might consider, at least when it's emulatable, playing Ghost of Yotei, but even that I'm hesitant on. But it's not something that like, oh, I'm so disappointed it's not coming to PC. If it never comes to PC, I'm like, oh, whatever, who cares? But if it's emulatable, I might consider trying it. It's just, it's not something that I care about enough, because pretty much every franchise that Sony has now, they are replacing their male leads with women, which I don't have a problem with female leads in general, but I have a problem when you're replacing the men with women. You're replacing the males with female leads. Basically having them come in and steal the games away from the original characters. That's where I have a problem. You have a female-led game, otherwise, like, the franchise is started with the female lead, I'm totally fine with that. And those are ones where I don't want them to replace it with a male lead, like with Metroid. I don't want someone other than Samus as the character in Metroid. I'm sorry, I just don't want that. Federation Force, I mean, one of my buddies has told me that it's actually not that bad of a game, and it's actually pretty decent. And I do own the copy. I have the physical copy of it, although I have it, backed up digitally to my 3DS. And one of these days, I'll probably actually give the game a legitimate shot. But I don't consider it a proper Metroid game. Metroid is Metroid, and Metroid has Samus. Point blank, period, end of story. Tomb Raider should be Lara Croft. It shouldn't be someone else. Uncharted should be Nathan Drake. And I know that that's going back to a male thing, but the point I'm trying to make is that when you have a franchise that's already female-led, keep it female-led. When you have a franchise that's male-led, keep it male-led. Stop changing it. But, yeah. I'm sick of this nonsense. And PlayStation has been especially egregious with doing these things with all of their franchises. If they didn't do it with every franchise, it wouldn't be nearly as much something that I'm like just completely rejecting. But they've just done it with every single one of their franchises, replacing. I mean, like, the only example that where it wasn't a female lead who replaced the male character is Spider-Man. And even then, they still gave Mary Jane way more prominence and made her way more overpowered than otherwise. And I know how you feel about Miles, even though I think that Miles should not have been put in that way, because it feels like he's basically just. It doesn't feel like it's a good way to bring him in. It's not like they gave Peter Parker the respect that was due, and that he actually died off, and so then Miles took on the mantle. And it's like what they did in Into the Spider-Verse, and that's just the very first one. So that's. But then instead, they basically killed him off without actually killing him off, had him completely betray his Uncle Ben. And the whole point of with great power comes great responsibility to go off and fight climate change instead. And then all the other ways that they completely disrespected and tore him down as a character while building up Mary Jane. And then Miles basically just kind of got... Miles being put in that role felt like it was an afterthought. Getting him replacing Spider-Man. It felt like it was an afterthought. It wasn't like it built up to it. They did, from everything I have seen about what they did with the story, Miles really didn't have that much prominence in the story. He really wasn't... They didn't do his character justice enough. And it kind of just felt like... Maybe not out of nowhere that they put him in that role, because obviously, you know, you're playing as him about half the time when you're doing the Spider-Man stuff, but more just like it didn't feel earned in the same sense, and not because Miles is a bad character, not because he didn't deserve to be in that position, but it wasn't like a proper story build up to him getting to that point. It was more like, we're just gonna tear Peter down as much as possible, then we're going to effectively kill him off, and then here, Miles, you get the leftovers. You're thrown into this position because we're getting rid of Peter. Instead of it being like, you know, because Miles has proven himself time and time again, because he's good at what he does. You know, he's obviously grown as a character. He's grown as as Spider-Man, everything else. And Peter feels good about putting it in his hands. Instead, it's more like Peter gets completely torn to shreds, beaten down, humiliated. And then in the end, he decides, you know, maybe instead of doing this whole Spider-Man thing where I'm very uniquely gifted to do this, instead I'm just going to go off and fight climate change because I'm smart and I can handle that stuff. And yeah, the story was a travesty. And I feel like they did both Peter and Miles dirty in that. And I like Miles as a character. I totally understand the reasons why you don't. I do understand. But that's not... But for me, I thought he was a good character. Although the stealth sections sucked in Spider-Man, in the first Spider-Man game. They were just garbage.
Yeah.
But his game, it was fun playing as Miles. And from everything I've gathered, the gameplay-wise, it's fun playing as Miles and Peter in Spider-Man 2. It's just the story is complete and utter garbage. But I've ranted enough about that multiple times, and I'm going to cede the floor to you from here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really certain if I had anything additional from the original stuff there, but, you know, it's... when you mentioned everything, because I know I mentioned earlier about, of course, King Demon Souls, but I thought about it too, and I was like, now that I think about it, most of the games I wanted from Sony to get ported to PC were just mainly like PS4 or PS3 games, apart from, you know, going back to their older catalog of like PS2 games and whatnot. So there definitely wouldn't be too many games I can think of that I would say, yeah, because for the most part, most of the other games have already been ported to PC anyway. I mean, they did it with God of War Ragnarok. They did it with, like you said, well, that was, I think, a PS4 game, Uncharted. They ported over Last of Us Part 2 remake, Last of Us Part 1 remake, Spider-Man 2. They ported over God of War Ragnarok. So they've already ported over a lot of games, but they just never really ported the stuff that I had an ear for or an eye for. And the other stuff, like you said, I've not released it anyway. I wasn't going to get Wolverine. I wasn't going to get Intergalactic. Those games just do not appeal to me at all. So yeah, like Demon Souls really the only game that they had, and they blew it for me. So yeah, it's good that this is being, like I said, good for preservation, but otherwise, it's like, I'm not really missing anything out. I will go ahead and get like the PS3 recomps, because those will be the treasure trove, okay?
Yeah.
And eventually, if we can get like PS4 games, so we're able to get more stuff. Gravity Rush 1 and 2, that's gonna be awesome. Getting Nathan Drake collection, I think it was remastered for the PS4. Getting all that stuff will be better and be stuff I'm interested in. So this is good, but it's not going to impact me in the long run. But I will answer your question as to why they actually did give Miles the role at the end of Spider-Man 2. And that's because he had the exaggerated swagger of a black teen, as I think IGN put it. So that's why he became the main Spider-Man. Peter just didn't have that.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my thoughts, or my additional thoughts on the situation.
One last thing I will say is that, like, Astrobot.
Oh yes,
it's one of those where I'm like, I would be interested in playing it if it came over to PC. I'd probably emulate it whenever the emulation is possible. But it's not something where I'm like, oh, I need to play this game. It's more like, it looks fun. I'm sure it's great. I've heard great things about it. It appeals to me. I enjoyed 3D platformer collectathons, that kind of stuff. But if I never play it, I'm really not heartbroken at all, because I have more than enough other 3D platformers, including some of the classic PlayStation ones, that I could play. And when we get our recomps, it's going to be even better, because there are some real gems in there. Especially, I love the early Ratchet and Clank games. The first one I didn't like as much, although I think a recomp would probably be better, probably fix the problems with the original one. But 2 and 3 are super good, especially 2. 2 is my favorite. 3 is also really good. And, there's a handful of other ones on PS3, etc. I definitely... Into the Nexus. That's one of the ones I have on PS3 that I got late. I haven't played through it. I've emulated a little bit on the Steam Deck, but it's stuck at only 30 FPS, and it has a lot of dips because of CPU side. But I think there's supposed to be a 60 FPS mod. I just don't know if that would work for Steam Deck. It would definitely work on my desktop, though, and that may just be how I play it, but I may also just wait for a recomp. I mean, we'll kind of see, because I'm sure that there are other games that are higher on the recomp list in terms of priority, so who knows. But anyway, let's go ahead and start closing out for the night, and we'll get into our recommendations and dissuasions. So why don't you start us off?
All right. So a couple things for me for recommendations. The first one is going to be, if you've already started playing Palworld already from the original early access, and you want to continue on, start fresh. I think there are so many new changes to the game where it really makes a difference to your experience, and I think it's worth just starting from fresh. It shouldn't take you too long to get caught up, depending on how much of the game you've completed. Like I said, I've only played about 8 hours of 1.0, and I'm probably about 30%, maybe at least closer to 50% of the progress I've made in the pre 1.0 version. So like maybe 40%, but it hasn't taken me as long to get to this point, which I think probably would have taken me about 20 to 30 hours originally. So it's definitely an easier experience on that end. Next recommendation is, if you do not have any audio for the game at all, go into the settings, turn up the master volume, and then it should fix things for you. Like I said, on the Steam Deck, it wasn't that big of an issue, but on my desktop, I was having an issue there. And then my last recommendation is going to be, get the glider as soon as possible. It's very useful to have. It's a very key tool, and as a result, you definitely don't want to go into any boss tower fights without it, because otherwise you'll just have to jump to your death and just come back later and reclaim your items. So go ahead, get the glider. It's very useful for traversal, and it's just a good item in general. So as soon as you can get it, make it and use it. But those are my recommendations.
All right. Well, my recommendations are related to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and that is specifically with make sure that you get the skill Brush with Death, which is in the yellow skill tree, the Raven skill tree. Make sure you get that as early as possible, because that is the skill that makes it possible for you to slow down time when you dodge an attack at the right moment. And the dodge window is pretty generous, at least by default. You can, obviously, if you don't want it to be that generous, you can also actually modify the amount of time you have there. And I've been considering modifying the window for parrying, because it's a little too big of a window, and I like having it a little closer because that's just what I'm used to more. But anyway, the second recommendation related to Valhalla is use spears for your weapon, especially when you're dealing with enemies that are very fast, close range enemies, and or enemies with shields. Very useful for both. Yes, you still have to avoid their attack. When they have a shield, you still have to avoid their attacks before you'll really be able to get hits in. Dodge, so you get the slowdown time. But I definitely have found that it is a lot easier to get those hits in with the spear because of the additional range. So, and it's really easy to use. All right, dissuasions.
One dissuasion for me also for Power World, and that's going to be, do not build a base too close to the starting area, and I guess also as additional note, be careful not to build it too far out either. If you build it too close to the starting area, you just have an additional waypoint that you can teleport to, which is kind of pointless since there are already 2 in the starting area. That, makes having an additional one pointless. So you can go a bit further out, and I'm sure you can go back and dismantle your bases and just build a new one elsewhere, but I think it's just, rather than having to transport all of the items you have and all the supplies from one base to another, it's just simpler to build elsewhere. But also just don't build it too far out, otherwise whenever you have an enemy raid, your pals will probably be underleveled and they will be wiped out pretty easily, and you'll probably be wiped out too. As well, so just don't build it too far out. I built my base at Flying Fish Coast. I thought that was a pretty good point, and there's also a nice level area, which also was good for just the overall design of how I had things. So, like I said, don't build it too far out, but also don't build it exactly at the starting area either.
All right. Well, my dissuasion, once again, for Assassin's Creed Valhalla is, if you have the DLC, do not start the Ragnarok missions, which, at least the one that I was able to access early on, was basically just one where you sleep at one of the trees and then you basically go into a dream sequence. But don't do that before you finish the main campaign, because you will probably be very underpowered. Maybe if you try doing it later game, it won't be as much of an issue, but like I did it early on, and my character's only at like 70 power or so, and I was getting wrecked by the boss. So, and I wasn't doing much of any damage to him, so it just really wasn't worth the effort, especially for such a small arena with lava surrounding it that you can fall into and burn very, very fast. So, that is what I have for my dissuasions. So, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel. I am Xeracon. That's IAMXERACON. So youtube.com/@IamXeracon. No new content. No new content yet. Still working on stuff in the background, and I've had an idea pop up right now, but I'm also like, well, I already had another idea. I should probably commit to that.
Yeah.
So I'll see what happens on that end with things. So we'll see what happens there. And then I also have my other channel, Justin's Bible Blog. That's at Justin's Bible Blog. I still have the other video to work on. I just have to go ahead and get the recording done. Editing should be very simple. So once I have the recording finished, then it's just a matter of editing it and then uploading shortly after. And that should, Lord willing, come out this week sometime. But we'll see what happens with that.
All right. Well, you can find me on my YouTube gaming channel at the Frozen Gamer 87. I haven't put out anything new in a while, but I do have my Downsides of PC Gaming video in progress, and I hope to have that done very soon. God willing, I will have it up on the channel next week, but I'm not positive on that just yet. Either way, it shouldn't be more than a couple of weeks, as long as nothing prevents me from getting it up. But then also there's the YouTube channel for the podcast, as well as the Rumble channel. On YouTube, that's at the Orange Box Podcast. On Rumble, it's not a custom URL, but you can still find us there. In both situations, the video version of the podcast goes live every Friday at 7 a.m. Central Time, barring technical issues. The audio-only version goes live on all major audio podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and others. And that goes live at 12 a.m. Central Time every Friday, barring technical issues. We're actually coming up now on 3 years doing the podcast. It's about 11 weeks until we will be at our 3rd birthday. So, that's every week that we've been doing this. So it's been a good time, and hopefully, God willing, we'll just keep going and going and going, regardless of how few listeners we have. It's a good time, talking every week with my buddy and talking about video games, getting that outlet, and just catching up each week. So, I guess if you want to contact us, you can send us an email to theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on the video version of the podcast, either on YouTube or on Rumble, and we'll be sure to read your comment on the show. Comment or question or what have you, even if it's an insult. Though, if there's swearing involved, we'll have to censor it a little bit. But, nevertheless, that is everything. So, last chance. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right, well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, we're coming for you, Sony, and your little games, too. Orange Box Podcast. Out.